Why Arwen gives up her immortality in The Lord of the Rings. Arwen's choice to become mortal puzzles many fans of The Lord of the Rings, but is clarified throughout the Legendarium, which was created by British fantasy pioneer J.R.R. Tolkien. Tolkien released his magnum opus, The Lord of the Rings, in 3 parts between 1954 and 1955, and Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy adapted 1 part per movie. Although Jackson didn't use the novel's dialogue word for word, he adapted Arwen's, Liv Tyler, choice of mortality faithfully, successfully conveying the pain of immortality after Aragorn's, Viggo Mortensen, death in a haunting vision. This vision happens as Elrond, Hugo Weaving, tries to convince Arwen to sail west with him by describing the alternative in torturous detail. Aragorn would grow old and die, while she would remain forever a widow. Situated in The Lord of the Rings, the Two Towers movie, this vision has the opposite effect to what Elrond intended. Ultimately, rather than choosing to leave Aragorn, she chooses to leave immortality. This way, she can have Aragorn and not have to bear the pain of eternal life without him. Neither Tolkien nor Jackson explained the mechanics of this fully, but discourses do exist. Arwen could choose to be immortal or mortal in Lodar, because she's part elf, part human. Those with both elvish and human blood in Lord of the Rings are often offered the choice between the elvish fate or the human one. Arwen's choice of mortality was known as the choice of Luthien, because the first time this choice was offered was to Arwen's ancestor, Luthien, who was actually half Maya, another immortal species, and half elf. The fully immortal Luthien fell in love with the mortal Beren. They both died, and Lord of the Rings' 15 Valor allowed Luthien to choose between her elvish fate or returning, with Beren, to life as a mortal. Luthien chose mortality. Her son with Beren, Dior, was therefore mortal. Dire married an elf and had Elwing, who was therefore half-half. Meanwhile, Tuor, man, and Idril, elf, were Middle-earth's other exceptional mixed-species couple. Their son, Arendelle, married Elwing and had Elrose and Elrond. Elrose and Elrond were given Luthien's choice. Elrose chose mortality, founding the Dúnedain. Elrond chose immortality, and to the children of Elrond, a choice was also appointed. Like Luthien, Arwen chose mortality to avoid eternity without her mortal love, and for the remote possibility of an afterlife together. Why Arwen gives up her immortality in The Lord of the Rings. Arwen gives up her immortality because mortals are not bound forever to the circles of the world, and beyond them is more than memory. Elvish immortality is incomplete in Lord of the Rings, as elves' bodies are subject to death from grief, weariness, injury, or consumption by their souls if they stay in Middle-earth too long. More importantly, elf souls, which are fully immortal, are tied to Arda, the world on which Middle-earth was a continent. After the death of the body, their souls would normally flee to the halls of Mandos in Aman to await possible reincarnation. The fate of the soul was the most fundamental difference between elves and men. What happens when elves die in Lord of the Rings is different from what happens to men. After death of the body, men's souls also go to the halls of Mandos, but it is only a stopover before they depart to a location unknown, even to the Valor, leaving Arda for a mystery fate. The fate of the soul is the most fundamental difference between elves and men. Along with lifespan, this is the only clear change incurred by a part elf's choice of mortality, with changes to other elvish features, ear shape, telepathy, uncertain. Although indeterminable, Arwen's afterlife may contain Aragorn. How Arwen's decision in the movies compares to J.R.R. Tolkien's books. Aragorn and Arwen's relationship in the Lord of the Rings movies saw the same result as it did in the books, but they got there slightly differently. In both versions of the story, Arwen chooses mortality, marries Aragorn, stays in Middle-earth, and eventually dies, although the dying part happens off-screen. Many of the movie's scenes were invented by Jackson, rather than pulled from the books. For instance, Arwen setting off for the Grey Havens, seeing a premonition of her child with Aragorn and changing her mind. But Jackson succeeded in communicating the core of the story. Death is hard, but accepting it offers reward, not punishment. The point of this storyline is the deep agony of Arwen's decision. She was stuck between a rock and a hard place, although she only really realized how bitter the gift of men was as Aragorn finally died. Crucially, both immortality and mortality are gifts, but both have drawbacks that one agonizing between them is uniquely forced to confront. In creating scenes of Arwen's indecision, Jackson had let this be known, therefore getting to the heart of